Murdaugh is a former law partner at PMPED law firm where the M was for Murdaugh. The firm has since been renamed. His great-grandfather was the founder, and the 64-year-old graduate of the University of Carolina's law school was part of the family's legal powerhouse, which goes back generations in South Carolina's Low Country region. A portrait of Murdaugh's grandfather once hung in the very courtroom where Alex Murdaugh's trial is taking place, but was removed by order of the judge for this trial. Most of his legal work was as a personal injury lawyer until he was forced out of the firm and then later disbarred. Alex Murdaugh met Margaret Maggie Kennedy Brandsetter and married August 1993. They had 2 kids, Buster Murdaugh in 1996 and Paul Murdaugh in 1999. The Murdaugh family seemed to be connected to several deaths. Stephen Smith was a former high school classmate of Buster Murdaugh who was found mysteriously dead in the middle of a country road in Hampton, South Carolina, with deep gashes in his forehead. Stephen's car was found 3 miles away with his wallet still inside and his car out of gas. An autopsy stated that Stephen Smith died from blunt force trauma caused by a hit and run. His mother, Sandy Smith, believes that he was murdered, however. Highway Patrol investigators did not agree with the autopsy's cause of death and decided to pursue different leads. There were rumors that Buster Murdaugh was having a secret affair with Stephen Smith and that the Murdaugh family may have been behind the killing. The case remains unsolved today. Paul Murdaugh had been charged in 2019 when drunkenly crashing a boat. At the time of his death, Paul was out on bail. Paul Murdaugh's blood alcohol level was 3 times the legal limit. People on the boat stated that before the collision, Paul Murdaugh morphed into his drunk alter ego Timmy and became belligerent, stripping off his clothes and slapping his girlfriend. The accident that Paul Murdaugh was charged for resulted in Mallory Beach, one of the passengers, being killed while injuring several others. A lawyer from Mallory Beach's family pressured Alex Murdaugh, as Paul Murdaugh's father, to release an account of his finances. This was a result of a lawsuit that was filed against Alex and several others whom the family sought to hold liable in the crash. A hearing for the matter was scheduled for 3 days after the killings. There have been suspicions on whether the police were negligent in their investigation or simply gave Paul Murdaugh favorable treatment based on the documents and the videos that have surfaced. Shortly after the crash, one of the passengers of the boat told officers that Paul Murdaugh had in fact been driving the boat. The officer, however, wrote in the report that this passenger stated that they were not sure who was in fact driving the boat. Gloria Satterfield worked as a nanny and a housekeeper for the Murdaugh family for more than 20 years. But in February of 2018, Gloria Satterfield suffered an injury. She fell at the Murdaugh home and then died from her injuries several weeks later. Police are looking into the cause of Gloria's death because her family has long thought, based on the Murdaugh accounts, that Gloria tripped over the Murdaugh dogs and had fallen down the steps of the Murdaugh home. In the case of Gloria Satterfield, the coroner was never notified about her death, therefore no autopsy was done. On Gloria's death certificate, her death was listed as natural, which aligns with an accidental fall. Alex Murdaugh introduced Gloria's 2 adult sons, Tony and Little B, to a lawyer after their mother's funeral. Alex suggested to the boys that they file a wrongful death lawsuit against him for their mother because he wanted to take care of them financially for a little bit. This lawyer said that he would help the sons resolve any issues they had surrounding their mother's death. In a recent lawsuit, the sons have stated that they did not have any prior acknowledgement of the connection that Alex Murdaugh had with the lawyer that he had suggested. Corey Fleming, who was the lawyer that Alex Murdaugh had suggested to Little B and Tony Satterfield, made a deal with Alex and his insurers for $4.3 million. After lawyer fees, Gloria Satterfield's sons were supposed to receive around $2.8 million. The sons stated in September of 2021 they had just recently learned about the deal and they never received any of that money. Alex Murdaugh admitted in June 2022 that he owed her sons the full settlement plus lawyer fees, $4.3 million in all. Fleming and Murdaugh were lifetime friends. Murdaugh and Fleming had been college roommates. Fleming was a groomsman in Murdaugh's wedding, and he had also been the godfather to Murdaugh's son, Paul. It is believed by prosecutors that the plan was to convince Satterfield's sons to hire Corey Fleming as their attorney. then have Chad Westendorf as the family's personal representative on financial and probate matters for their mother's estate. So how it would work, according to authorities, is that whenever Alex Murdaugh's money from his insurance providers had started to come in, so his settlement that he had reached with the Satterfield family started to come in, it ended up in the bank account that belonged to Murdaugh that mimicked a legitimate business. And how it was allegedly happening was that Fleming was allegedly writing the checks to Murdaugh's illegitimate businesses using the money from the settlement he received on the Satterfield's family's behalf. Fleming and Murdaugh allegedly had conspired to keep 3.4 of the $4.3 million that were awarded to the Satterfield family for the insurance settlement. From that 3.4 that they had taken, Alex Murdaugh allegedly pocketed majority of that share and used it to fund his affluent lifestyle by paying off his debts. Once the scheme was revealed and Alex Murdaugh ended up in jail, Fleming and Westendorf, as a part of legal proceedings, paid back the money that they had collected. Both men claimed that they were unwitting participants and were manipulated by Murdaugh. Fleming is accused of obtaining money by false pretenses, insurance fraud, money laundering, breach of trust, computer crimes, and criminal conspiracy in partnership with Alex Murdaugh. It is theorized that Fleming took part in the scheme because he was in debt and needed money quickly to pay off his bills. According to court documents, Murdaugh sent Fleming kickbacks in excess of 6 figures. Fleming allegedly used the money to pay for his large credit card debt, mortgage, the IRS, and to purchase music from iTunes and video games. Alex Murdaugh was arrested for the missing settlement funds. He was charged with 2 counts of obtaining property by false pretenses, a felony with a max sentence of 10 years in prison. Police picked him up at a detox center in Orlando, Florida. Alex Murdaugh called 911 shortly after 10 p.m. on January 7th of 2021. He reported that he found his wife, Maggie, and his son, Paul, murdered on his property on Islington, South Carolina. Alex can be quoted telling 911 that I need the police and ambulance immediately. My wife and son were just shot badly. Alex Murdaugh stated that he found them near the kennels on their property. Alex also claimed that he checked on both of them to see if they were breathing. When officials arrived at the residence, they reported finding Maggie and Paul's bodies in pools of blood. After investigating the scene, Paul had 2 rounds shot into him. The first round struck his chest. The second entered his shoulder, traveled to his neck and brain, resulting in it being severed from his body. Maggie was found lying face down in mud about 30 feet away from her son, Paul. Maggie had been shot at least 4 times with a rifle, one of those being execution style in the back of the head. Officer Daniel Green's body camera footage of the night shows that Murdaugh was quick to offer Green an explanation for why this might have happened. Murdaugh was quoted saying, "This is a long story. My son was in a boat wreck. He's been getting threats." Murdaugh can also be heard saying, "I know that's what it is." On September 4th, 2021, Paul Murdaugh claimed that he had been shot in the head while on the side of the road by someone who was casually driving by while he was changing a flat tire. Alex was admitted to the hospital and managed to survive his attack. Medical records showed that Alex had been shot in the back of the head but had been able to call for help afterwards. Jim Griffin, Alex's lawyer, said that his client sustained a skull fracture and hemorrhaging from the shooting, but SLED described the wound as quote-unquote superficial. It turned out that Alex Murdaugh was not alone on the side of the road like he claimed. He was with Curtis Eddie Smith. Alex Murdaugh eventually admitted that he asked Curtis to shoot him in the head. Alex's lawyers explained that Alex, in the belief that he would be helping his surviving son Buster collect his $10 million life insurance policy, came up with the plan to have somebody shoot him. Alex Murdaugh later issued a statement to apologize to his quote-unquote friends, family, and colleagues. He also took that time to announce that he would be entering rehab for his addiction to painkillers. This plan ended in the arrest of Alex and Curtis. They were both charged with aggravated assault, assisting in a suicide attempt, and insurance fraud. Curtis states that he did not shoot Alex Murdaugh and that the gun went off as he went to grab Alex's arm to stop him from shooting himself. Alex and Curtis were later charged with more felony charges, including distribution and purchase of oxycodone. The South Carolina Supreme Court removed Alex Murdaugh's law license over his quote-unquote egregious ethical misconduct. Alex did not contest to this decision. After the murder charges, Alex Murdaugh was indicted by the grand jury for 9 counts of tax evasion for failing to report roughly $6.9 million of illegally earned income between 2011 and 2019. He owes roughly $489,000 in taxes. By this time, Alex Murdaugh already had 90 state financial crime charges against him. These charges stem from 18 indictments for his schemes defrauding victims of roughly $9.8 million. The prosecution team, led by Creighton Waters, painted Alex Murdaugh as desperate. They argued that the pressure from Alex Murdaugh's decades of alleged financial crimes created the perfect storm that led Alex Murdaugh to kill Paul and Maggie. Alex allegedly did this act in order to obtain sympathy and potentially end the investigations into his accused financial crimes. On January 25th, prosecutor Creighton Waters revealed publicly for the first time in his opening statement that investigators found a blue raincoat that tested positive for gunpowder residue that they believed Alex allegedly stashed at his mother's home a week after the murders. Waters continued to poke holes at Alex Murdaugh's alibi by telling the juror that he had a video that would contradict Alex's story. Waters is quoted saying, "He told everyone who would listen that he wasn't there. The evidence will show you he was there at the murder scene." The defense, led by Richard Harpulian, argued that Alex Murdaugh is a victim in all of this. They frequently referred to Murdaugh as a family man who deeply loved Paul and Maggie. When asked by the defense, multiple witnesses testified that Alex Murdaugh would always pick up the phone if one of them called. Harpulian argued in his opening statements that it was unthinkable a father who had a wonderful and loving relationship with his son could perpetuate such a horrendous crime. He described Paul Murdaugh's killing. "The gases from that shot literally exploded his head like a watermelon hit by a sledgehammer. All that was left was the front of his face. Everything else was gone. His brain exploded out of his head, hit the ceiling in the shed, and dropped to his feet. Horrendous, horrible, butchering." Harpulian accused SLED of zeroing in on Alex from day one, quote-unquote, saying that pounding that square peg in the round hole instead of the search for the real killer. On week one, jurors heard testimony and saw the gruesome photos of the crime scene. Maggie and Paul Murdaugh were both lying in pools of blood, brain matter, and tissue. There were several first responders that took the stand to testify that Alex Murdaugh had no visible blood on him when they arrived at the crime scene. Even after he claimed to have touched Maggie and Paul's bodies to check for their pulse, Alex even admitted to rolling Paul over and handling his son's cell phone. Alex Murdaugh repeated the same timeline in his videotaped interviews with law enforcement. Alex claimed that he rode around the property with Paul and then ate dinner with Maggie and Paul, and that was the last time he saw them. In Alex Murdaugh's versions of events, after dinner, Maggie went down to the dog kennels, then Paul left without saying where he was going. Alex then fell asleep for about 20 minutes while watching TV. Upon awakening, Alex Murdaugh tried to call and text Maggie, but she did not answer the phone. Alex Murdaugh then went to visit his mother a little after 9 p.m., about 20 minutes away. Murdaugh then returned to Moselle through the main gates, and the lights were on in the house, he said, but Paul and Maggie were not inside. Alex Murdaugh decided to drive down to the kennels to look for Maggie shortly after 10 p.m. when he found Maggie and Paul dead. He called 911 at 10:07. Alex was apparently gripped by fear, so he drove back to the main house to get a gun before returning to the kennels to wait for first responders. There was a videotape of an interview that Alex Murdaugh had done with SLED agents Jeff Croft and David Owen that was shown to the jurors. Alex Murdaugh started to sob hysterically during the interview and blurted out a garbled statement. Waters then paused the video to ask Croft on his thoughts on the matter, and Croft stated that he believed Alex had said, "It's just so bad. I did him so bad." The defense on cross-examination slowed down the audio from the recorded interview and asked Croft whether he now heard they instead of I. Croft maintained that Alex Murdaugh said I. A debate raged in the courtroom and on social media on whether Alex inadvertently confessed and over which pronoun Alex actually used in the video. The most crucial piece of evidence presented by the prosecution came when jurors were shown the video on Paul Murdaugh's phone taken moments before he was murdered. It was recorded at 8:44 p.m. at the dog kennels, which was 3 minutes before prosecutors say he was murdered. In the video, Paul was trying to get a good shot of the tail of his friend Rogan Gibson's black lab Cash. Paul had been concerned about Cash's tail and had told Gibson on the phone a moment before that he would send a video, but Gibson would never get said video. There are two other voices that can be heard in the background of the video bantering about a dog with a chicken in its mouth. Prosecutors believe that those are the voices of Maggie and Alex Murdaugh. There are multiple witnesses that testified to the voice being Alex Murdaugh's on the video. About 3 minutes later, at 8:49 p.m., both Maggie and Paul Murdaugh's phones go dark. Waters explains that this is when they were both murdered. This video evidence contradicts Alex Murdaugh's claims that he never visited the dog kennels that night until he discovered Maggie and Paul murdered. The jurors were shown a Snapchat video taken by Paul Murdaugh that he sent to a friend about an hour before his death showing Alex Murdaugh. In the video, Paul and his dad are laughing as they looked at a poorly planted tree on the property. In the video, Alex can be seen wearing a blue shirt and khaki pants, which were different than the white t-shirt and shorts he wore when first responders arrived at the scene later that night. The earlier set of clothes has never been found, and the later set were freshly laundried, with no blood on them, despite Murdaugh claiming that he had checked the bodies of Paul and Maggie for signs of life. A ballistics expert testified for the prosecution that older shell casings found on the property were cycled through the same weapon as the shell casings found near Maggie Murdaugh's body. The prosecution believed that Maggie Murdaugh was murdered with Paul Murdaugh's .300 blackout rifle, which has never been recovered. An employee at Alex Murdaugh's law firm, founded by his great-grandfather over a century ago, discovered a check that was supposed to be addressed to the law firm, but instead was addressed to Mr. Murdaugh. After finding this suspicious check, it led to the firm to investigate, and after looking into the matter further, they discovered evidence of financial wrongdoing, then asked Alex to resign, which he agreed to. According to prosecutors, this all happened nearly 3 months after the murders of Maggie and Paul Murdaugh. Shelley Smith, a caregiver for Alex Murdaugh's mother, saw Alex the night of the murders and testified that he was carrying what might have seemed to be a blue tarp into his mother's home in the following days after the murders. She also testified that Alex pressured her to tell anyone who asked that he had visited his mother's home that night of the murders for at least 45 minutes, when he had only been there for 20. The Murdaugh family housekeeper took the stand and told jurors that Alex pressured her to say that he had been wearing a different shirt the day of the slaying. Marion Proctor was weeping as she testified that she pressured her sister to go and support her husband that night. Maggie had texted her sister that day that Alex wanted her to come home that night, but she did not plan on it and she did not want to go. Proctor, knowing that her sister Maggie often stayed at the family's beach house in Modesto, but Alex's father had just been admitted to the hospital, told Maggie that Alex and his dad were super close, so that's probably what you should do. Go be with him if he needs you. After the murders, Murdaugh allegedly told Proctor whoever committed the horrendous crimes had thought about it for a really long time. He also spoke about the boat wreck. Proctor said that after the killings, Murdaugh was very intent on clearing Paul's name. He said that that was his number one goal, Proctor testified, which she thought was strange because her number one goal was to find out who killed her sister and Paul. Peter Wadowski, an SLED special agent, was the final prosecution witness. He had a comprehensive timeline from the day of the murders, including 4,820 GPS coordinates from Alex Murdaugh's suburban cell phones and other data. According to the data, Alex arrived at the dog kennels at 10:05 p.m. with 53 seconds and called 911 less than 20 seconds later at 10:06 p.m. with 14 seconds. However, Alex told the 911 dispatcher that he had already checked the pulses of Maggie and Paul, whose bodies were found 30 feet apart. Wadowski explained that a month before the murders, Paul Murdaugh had texted his dad confronting him about his drug addiction after Maggie found a bag of pills in Alex's computer bag. Alex texted his wife, "I am very sorry that I do this to all of you. I love you." According to Wadowski, Maggie did not respond. Prosecutors rested their case after presenting 4 weeks of evidence and 61 witnesses. Alex Murdaugh eventually admitted that he lied about not seeing Maggie or Paul after dinner to investigators when he took the stand. He had in fact been with Maggie and Paul Murdaugh at the dog kennels at 8:45 p.m., less than 5 minutes before prosecutors say that they were both murdered. Alex Murdaugh still denied killing his son or his wife. When Jim Griffin asked Alex Murdaugh why he lied, Alex Murdaugh said that as his addiction evolved over time, he had incidents of great paranoia. He was nervous as a deputy sheriff swabbed his hands and investigators asked about his relationship with his wife and his son, coupled with his distrust in SLED, which is the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division. He also had a bag of drugs on him that night. Alex Murdaugh explains that on January 7th, he was not thinking clearly. He did not think he was capable of reason, and he lied about being down there, and he was sorry that he did that. He states that he would never do anything intentionally to hurt either one of them. When Jen Griffin asked Alex Murdaugh if he repeatedly lied, Alex Murdaugh answered with, "Yes, he did lie. He continued to lie. Yes, sir. He had to keep lying." Alex blamed the murders on the boat wreck, suggesting that vigilantes who read about the case on social media had slaughtered his family. During a cross-examination that went on for 2 days, Waters grilled Alex Murdaugh on his inconsistent statements. Waters pointed out that Murdaugh claimed that he had checked on the pulses of both Maggie and Paul before calling 911, but his GPS data from his Chevrolet Suburban revealed that he had made the call 19 seconds after pulling up to the scene. Alex Murdaugh, after being presented with the evidence, changed his story and said that he checked on their pulses while he was on the phone with 911. Then Walter states that you, like you have done so many times in your life, had to back up and make up a new story to fit with the facts. Alex Murdaugh simply responded, "No, sir." Alex Murdaugh seemed to come up with an explanation for every piece of evidence that Waters produced: the dog video, the Snapchat video, the alleged blue tarp, and the raincoat. Alex claims that him and Paul were driving around the property in order to check on plantings for fields they used to hunt doves. The work made him sweaty, along with the fact that he was heavier and taking opiates during this time, contributing to him sweating more. Alex states that after getting back to Moselle, he took a shower, and that was the reason he changed his digging clothes. He was reluctant to go to the kennels with Paul and Maggie, so he laid on the couch, but then eventually decided to take the golf cart to follow them. Murdaugh explains that when he arrived at the kennels, the dogs were running around, and he stated that one of the dogs, named Bubba, had chased and caught a chicken. He then took the chicken out of the dog's mouth and placed it on top of the dog crate, quote unquote, "and then I left." Alex then says he drove the golf cart straight back to the house and laid down on the couch again, explaining how he ended up at the dog kennels with Maggie and Paul allegedly moments before prosecutors say the murders happened. Alex Murdaugh couldn't recall bringing a tarp to his mother's house, he stated while taking the stand. He dismissed Smith's version of events, saying, "Shelley's got something in her mind about that." Alex Murdaugh explained that he had nothing to do with the blue rain jacket police found in a closet in his mother's home. The rain jacket tested positive for gunpowder residue, and this led to the speculation that it was wrapped around a weapon that had recently been fired. The defense called their ballistics expert to testify. They stated that based on the trajectory of the bullets that killed Maggie, the killer was no taller than 5'4". A crime scene analyst for the defense told juries that the shot that killed Paul was a contact wound to the back of the head that would have resulted in the shooter being injured from flying pellets and being covered in blood. Also, during his testimony, Alex Murdaugh had in fact admitted that he had taken money from his law clients and stated that it was due to his addiction. Alex says that he would consume as much as 2,000 milligrams of oxycodone a day during his addiction. He would also take up to 60 pills a day, spending $60K a week, and that would buy him 700 of what he described as the best pills for $80 each. Alex Murdaugh said nothing but loving things about Maggie and Paul during his testimony. He would repeatedly call them Mags and Pawpaw. He was also described as a man who was coping with his ailing parents, his mother with Alzheimer's, and his elderly father in a hospital. On the stand at court, Buster Murdaugh testified that his father, Alex Murdaugh, called him on the night of the murders. The call was at 9:10 p.m., which is minutes after Paul and Maggie Murdaugh were murdered, according to the prosecutors. And when questioned by Jim Griffin on the context of the conversation that he had with his dad, Alex Murdaugh, Buster states that he was just letting him know that he was going to Almeida to check on him, referring to his grandmother. And Was this an unusual conversation you had with him? Jim asks. Buster says, no, sir. Jim asks, what was his demeanor in the conversation? Buster replied, normal. Later that night, Buster testified that he received yet another phone call from Alex Murdaugh. Buster explains that his dad had just told him that his mother and his brother had been shot. He says that he and his girlfriend rushed down from where they were living in Rock Hill. What was his demeanor? Jim asked. Buster responds that his demeanor was, he was destroyed. He was heartbroken. I walked in the door, saw him, gave him a hug, and just broken down. Could he speak? Jim asked. Not really, replied Buster. Was he crying? Jim asked. Yes, sir, Buster replied. Lieutenant Britt Dove, a computer crime state agent, testified that he had processed data on 3 phones. Those phones belonged to Alex Murdaugh, Maggie Murdaugh, and Paul Murdaugh. When looking through Lieutenant Dove's results, police found some interesting details. Alex Murdaugh had called Maggie 5 times the night of the murders from 9 to 10 p.m. that were all unanswered. But they did not find that by looking through Alex Murdaugh's call history, because that activity had been deleted off Alex's phone. The logs, however, still appeared on Maggie Murdaugh's cell phone. This led investigators to believe that the activity was purposefully deleted off of Alex Murdaugh's cell phone. Alex Murdaugh then called several other numbers, and then shortly after his final call to Maggie Murdaugh at 10:03 p.m., he called 911 at 10:07 p.m. Prosecutors questioned the strange health tracker activity that was recorded on Alex Murdaugh's phone. There was a gap between 8:09 p.m. and 9:02 p.m. where there were no steps recorded. The lack of steps were suspicious because 74 steps were recorded between 8:05 p.m. to 8:09 p.m., and there were 283 steps between 9:02 and 9:06 p.m. Alex Murdaugh messaged Maggie stated he was going to see his mother at 9:08 p.m., 6 minutes after the steps resumed. Prosecutors also took a look at Alex Murdaugh's response time. Alex received a message from his sister, Lynn Murdaugh, in a family group chat at 8:31 p.m. the night of the murders. He did not read the message until the next day at 1:44 p.m., however, despite sending a message to Maggie Murdaugh the night of the murders at 9:08 p.m. Looking through the cell phone data, prosecutors concluded that Alex Murdaugh's response time was 5 to 40 minutes after receiving a message. After reviewing cell phone data, prosecutors believed that they narrowed down the precise timeline to the murders of Maggie and Paul to an 8-second window. According to Paul Murdaugh's phone, he FaceTimed his friend Rogan Gibson at 8:40 p.m. and then again at 8:44 p.m. The phone call lasted 11 seconds. He sent a text message to Megan Kimbrell at 8:48 p.m. Megan and him texted back and forth, and then he read the message that Megan had last sent him at 8:48 p.m. This was the last of Paul's activity on his phone. At 8:49 p.m., Rogan Gibson sent Paul a text message, but it was never read. According to Maggie Murdaugh's phone, at 8:49 p.m., she read her last message, and it was the group message that Alex's sister had sent. Maggie never opened or responded to several messages or calls after 8:49 p.m. Alex Murdaugh, Buster Murdaugh, Alex Murdaugh's brother, John Marvin Murdaugh, all tried to contact her without success. Alex Murdaugh messaged her, "Call me babe," at 8:47 p.m., which went unread. Maggie's phone changed from portrait to landscape orientation at 8:54 p.m. and then again at 9:06 p.m. This indicated that it was in someone's hands. Maggie's screen went on and off a minute later at 9:07 p.m. This indicated that someone tried and failed to unlock it. Health tracker data on Maggie Murdaugh's phone stated that there were 59 steps on Maggie's cell phone at 8:55 p.m., which is after prosecutors state that Maggie and Paul were already dead. It told investigators that someone was holding Maggie's phone and took steps, and those steps were recorded. The court then heard the prosecution and the defense's closing arguments. Waters told the jurors that Murdaugh was a cunning conman who tried to deceive them when he took the stand to explain his version of events. This is a man who made his trade online. He lied about the most important facts in the case and effortlessly and easily pivoted to a new lie when confronted by something he wasn't prepared for, Waters said. Jim Griffin argued that investigators quote-unquote failed miserably in their probe and could have found the real killer if they had done their job properly. Alex Murdaugh was found guilty after the jury deliberated for less than 3 hours, and the very next day he was sentenced to life in prison. That is the case of Paul and Maggie Murdaugh, and even though Alex Murdaugh has never admitted to the crimes, he has been found guilty in the court of law for Maggie and Paul's murder. He will spend the rest of his life behind bars thinking about his choices. He is yet to be sentenced for all his financial crimes, and with all those charges that he has against him, even if he would not have been found guilty of the murders, he was definitely looking at multiple years behind bars simply from financial schemes. The legacy that the Murdaugh family held so high for several generations spanning decades were tarnished by the choices of Alex Murdaugh, and has left his son Buster Murdaugh alone. Luckily, Paul and Maggie Murdaugh were able to find justice for their untimely deaths. Until next time, be safe, earthlings.